Wow, all you people got up this morning? Wow. On this rainy day, thank you. That's a compliment. Thank you. Appreciate it. I know you came to see this handsome guy. I adopted him years ago.
Good morning. Are we all? I'm so glad to see all of you this morning. Am I on? Am I on? Yes.
Yeah, a little louder.
A little louder. I don't think I'm not. I'm not on. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll do it with that.
Do you want to use?
I don't know that we need it.
We might just get back.
Well, I'm not sure you really need to hear me. I really wanted to just welcome all of you and thank you for being here with us at our book festival after a break that we unintentionally took of 3 years. And we're so pleased to see so many of you out. You know, Sunday morning, obviously we had a superstar too, actually, to talk to you first thing. But thank you, and we thank you for everything. We tell you this probably way too many times, but we want you to know how much your support means to this book festival. We can't do it without you. We don't want to charge for our events. We want everybody that wants to be able to come. And the way we do that is through certainly the generosity of our donors and our sponsors, the Athenaeum being an important one, and In Magazine, who brings us Rob Cocuzzo, another. But you guys do it. You come, you attend, you support us in so many ways. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to give you Kaylee Kochmore, our new executive director of the book festival, who's going to introduce Natalie Jacobson.
Good morning. It is my privilege and honor to introduce most beloved New England reporter and news anchor, Natalie Jacobson, here to talk about her newly released memoir, Every Life a Story, Natalie Jacobson Reporting. Natalie has won many awards over the years for her reporting and her work in broadcast television, including multiple Emmys, multiple Lifetime Achievement Awards, the 2007 Governor's Award, and really too many others to count. Beginning with her early and formative days in Chicago with her family, who immigrated to the United States from Serbia, Natalie's life story brings us to New Hampshire, to Thailand, and ultimately to Boston, where Natalie broke into the male-dominated, albeit relatively new, profession of broadcast journalism. With her impeccable work ethic and track record of creating news reports and television segments that resonated with viewers, Natalie rose through the ranks at WCVG-TV Boston Channel 5 to become the first woman to anchor the evening news in Boston. And during her 35-year tenure at Channel 5, Natalie reported on thousands of stories, including Queen Elizabeth II's visit to the city, multiple presidential campaigns, the blizzard of 1978, the September 11th attacks, and on so many other stories that have come to shape our regional and national identities. And while Natalie was devoted to her job delivering the news to the people of Boston, an understatement, you cannot read her story without knowing that as important as her job was and is to her, it is second to family and to giving back to her community. I believe that those values, at her core, are the reasons why the public came to count Natalie and her former husband and co-anchor for many years, Chet Curtis, as members of their own families who they would welcome into their homes and sit down together with each evening to share the news of the day. In conversation with Natalie today is editor of N Magazine and author of 2 books himself, Rob Cocuzzo. N Magazine is a longtime sponsor of the book festival, and not only has Rob been one of our featured authors many times in the past, but he sits on our Writers Advisory Board and has helped shape the wonderful weekend on Nantucket celebrating writers and the written word. So thank you, Rob, for all that you do to share the stories of our special island. And thank you, Natalie, for writing your memoir and sharing your life, a most inspiring story, with all of us.
Natalie?
Yes? Do we need this? Can you hear us?
Can you hear okay? Okay, we'll use these.
Okay.
Natalie, I am truly honored to be here on this stage with you. It feels a little bit like trying to pitch to David Ortiz right now as an interviewer, so I have to admit I'm a little bit nervous. But
you are not.
No, I am. I'm really honored, and congratulations, because I know how hard you've worked on this project. So it's my honor to be able to ask you some questions about it.
I had an opportunity when I was working with Dreamland to interview you.
That's right. That's why it feels a little bit.
When his first book, which is about Bob Coombs, right?
Right. I mean, we don't have to brag about me. We're here to brag about you. Let's start in honor of Father's Day. I thought, especially to give some folks some context, I thought we could talk about your father to start things off.
Okay.
Because in so many ways, he gave you some of the gifts that helped you drive ahead and break the glass ceiling. Can you talk a little bit about your dad and some of those, maybe things you witnessed?
Sure. There's a lot of irony to talking about my dad in terms of me, because my dad is a first-generation American. All four of my grandparents immigrated from Serbia in the late 1800s to Chicago and Michigan area. They worked in the copper mines in Minnesota and the farms in Michigan primarily. And so my dad lost his father when he was only 4 years old. And had no education, no contacts, no worldliness, typical of, I think, pretty much everybody of that time and of that generation, and I'm sure most people in this room can relate to that. So my father went from being a taxi cab driver and running a bowling alley when I was born to selling razor blades with Gillette Safety Razor in Chicago and eventually becoming the president of Gillette North America. Only in America. So, I mean, that's extraordinary, right? And I love to say that because it's the gift of this country and the opportunity through our freedom and liberty that is offered here as nowhere else. So when I was growing up, if you can imagine now, this dad was very old-fashioned. Girls were made to get married and have children, not to have careers. So, and it's not because he was mean in any way, it's what he knew, it's what he understood. So when it came time to go to college, he said, your mother can teach you everything you need to know. And luckily for me, my godfather, and in the Serbian Eastern Orthodox faith, the godfather, called the Kum, is a very influential person in the family. So my father would listen to what my Kum had to say. And he had a daughter exactly my age. So my godfather said to him, where's Natalie going to college? And my father was incredulous. You're sending Diane to school? Why? So my godfather explained life was moving along to him. And this was my senior year in high school. So on the long drive back from Chicago to Boston, my father said, maybe we could rethink this. I said, forget it, Dad. I was so mad at him. I said, I'll figure it out. I'll get a job. I'll put myself through school. I don't need your help. Besides which, it's my senior year, and everyone's already gotten their acceptances and rejections. Well, long story short, I did get an opportunity to go to the University of New Hampshire, which was an extraordinary experience. But I think one of the things that Rob was referring to in terms of the question is that many, many years later, after having gone through Girls Need Not Apply, I couldn't get an interview with channels 4, 5, or 7 back in the late 60s. We just don't hire girls. For the same reason my father didn't think I should go to college. You're just going to get married, have children, and so it'll be a waste of our time. And employers said the same thing to me. And I think what I realized, as I asked myself, so as I look back, why didn't you stop? What kept you going? And I realized, just by inference, if you will, or by living with my father, that he did. Because he wasn't stopped because he didn't have education, or he didn't have money, or he didn't have contacts. He just kept going. And I think somewhat subliminally, perhaps, within me, that gave me the strength to move forward in an age when girls need not apply.
I've had the opportunity to interview a number of female anchors, many of whom actually live on Nantucket or have some connections to Nantucket, and invariably they'll always mention you as the role model for them in terms of what inspired them to break into the industry.
That's nice, thank you.
I'm wondering, with a complete absence of that type of role model for you in that industry, who did you look to as you were growing up as someone that you kind of, and I mean another woman, that you looked at as someone that you would aspire to?
No one. There weren't any. I was actually asked that question when I was young and still working, and people that came to mind were Ted Koppel, who had Nightline going, Walter Cronkite, who was really the first time I looked at a TV and thought about being a news reporter. I had been in Bangkok for a couple of years. The war was going on, the Vietnam War, and I'm looking at this box with Walter Cronkite thinking, how do you get all those pictures and sound and people in that little box? What do you do? So there weren't any women at that time. That shows you how old I am. So I guess that's my answer.
Was there any other women in just public discourse that you looked to, or was it, there was?
No.
You were self-motivated?
Yeah. I guess I used to want to be a boy when I was a girl, because I wanted to play baseball, not because I wanted to be a reporter or president of the country or anything. I wanted to play baseball. And when I found out that only boys could play baseball, I was just brokenhearted. And my dad used to say, you should have been a boy. Look at those broad shoulders. And so anyway.
You mentioned Bangkok, and I think
I'm happy to be a girl. In this age of pronouns, I'm happy to be a girl.
You mentioned Bangkok, and I think it'd be worth, I'm trying to save, I want people to read the book, so let's not give everything away, but that's such a fascinating period of time in your life, because I think that you did learn a lot of the skills, or at least you saw the opportunity that could be out there for yourself by this unique experience that happened in Bangkok. Can you take us there and just give us some background?
It was a great experience. My first husband, Bill Jacobson, and I went to UNH together. That's where we met, fell in love, and got married. And he was in ROTC, as a first lieutenant, second lieutenant, I guess, in the Army. And we had no idea where we would be sent, and whether it would be Vietnam or some other place. And it turned out to be Bangkok, and you could bring your wife to Bangkok back then. So the two of us went. And what an experience it was. You know, in our country at the time, we were primarily a Judeo-Christian country, and mostly from Europe, our immigrants, our ancestors. So here was a Buddhist country, and which I knew nothing about, and a hot place. It was 99 degrees all of the time and 99% humidity. I thought I was going to die before we ever got to the hotel the first night. But what an experience it was. So to shorten the answer, I got a job as a secretary to the guy who was the regional manager on a contract with the United States regarding Vietnam supplies. I remember him asking me, do you take shorthand? And I went, with my fingers crossed behind my back. And that led to another job at Philco Ford, which was to be the administrator of this contract, a secret contract called, the public name was Seek Dawn. So it was my job to hire 400 people, from forklift operators to microwave, there was no satellite then, microwave operators to whatever that needed from the United States, and send them to Vietnam. And you have to, this is before anything that we all know now in terms of technology. So just to get a phone call to the United States could take all day. To get correspondence, as in paper and postage stamp, could take a week. So I had something like 18 girls working for me, and I was a girl myself. I was 21, so we were all in the same age bucket. I'll never forget this wonderful woman that I hired to be my personal secretary, because there was no way to do that job without someone who was holding your hand all the way in terms of getting things done. And I was interviewing her, and she said, now one thing, Natalie, you will have to understand, is that I do not write letters. If you want to write any correspondence to anyone, you will dictate it to me, and I take excellent shorthand. And I'm looking at this woman and thinking, oh my God, this woman is my mother's age. And then is this going to work? And she said, don't worry about our age. She said, if you're half as good at your job as I am in mine, we'll get along fine. Is that great? I love that woman. So we got along fine. But I learned about another culture. I learned about how the United States treated another country, which in my opinion was not as well as it could have been. I learned that we, the United States government, didn't necessarily learn about the culture, the religion, the lifestyle, what's important to a whole country, because it's completely different from the United States of America. And I met the ambassador and was shocked at the way we did business there. So it was wonderful to have that experience. And I've often said it's better than getting a master's degree in any subject here in the United States.
What was interesting is at the end of those 2 years, your supervisor, I guess you could say, said, "It's a shame, Natalie." What did he mean by that?
Well, he said, no, he said, he took me to lunch, and he said, you did a great job for me. You know, I look like a hero because you did yada yada. It was very nice. And he said, "I'm really glad that you're female and not male." And I said, "Why's that?" And he said, "Because when you get back to the United States, I don't have to worry about competing with you at Philco Ford for my job." And I laughed, and I said, "Well, that's very nice of you, but don't worry about it. I don't want your job." And what are you talking about? And he said, "You don't know what you're going back to. You're not going to get a job with this kind of responsibility in the United States." And I said, "I'll be fine. I'll be really fine." I couldn't believe how right he was.
Do you remember the moment where the idea of being a reporter crystallized in your mind and really seized your ambition?
I have to think about that. I think I was always interested in history and political science. I like reading newspapers more than anything. I did then, and I still do. So journalism started to percolate in my head, and then I started to think, well, newspaper, magazine, radio, TV, and I got fascinated, as I mentioned, with TV, primarily because with newspapers, there's a written word. With radio, there was the sound, the reading of the written word. With magazines, it was kind of a combination of written and pictures, but with TV, it was all of it. So I thought, ooh, and plus it was new. It was just getting started. And I don't know, I'm just built, I'm the type of person who loves to get on the genesis of anything for a lot of reasons. It just offers an opportunity to build, to grow, to be a pioneer, and not to follow a bunch of rules. So, but the one moment when I realized I'd made the right decision was I had worked for ascertaining the needs of the community at a little UHF station in Boston, the only station that granted me an interview, and read my portfolio. I wrote this portfolio. I did an op-ed piece. I argued for and against capital punishment in another piece. I wrote a fictional piece to show you how brilliant I am, and at the age of 24, and, you know, how great I am in writing, and you have to present something for somebody to see, right? So this guy, Jim Thistle, was the news director at Channel 56, offered me an interview and said, "I'll hire you as a cub reporter, but not for a year. I don't have the money." So I ascertained the needs of the community, which was required of all broadcasts then. It is not today. What a gift for a young girl wanting to get into journalism. I interviewed everyone from the governor to the guy digging ditches, you know, all kinds of people, all ages, all immigrants and not. I felt, wow, what a gift this is to me. I got to know who we're talking to when we do the news. So Channel 56 then stopped doing news. Channel 4 hired me only because their license was up for renewal. I was probably the most experienced person in town. And I used the information that I had to create these things called public service announcements, which are common today, but were not at that time. So it was like, if you picture it like an advertisement, a 30 or 60-second spot. So there was an orphanage called Home for Little Wanderers. They had, as I remembered it, 47 children that they could not find homes for. So I did a spot. I just created this thing. I said, send me 4 typical children. And I built 4 boxes, put each child on a box. I got a wonderful technician at Channel 4 to teach me about lighting and trucking cameras and things I knew absolutely nothing about, to learn the tools of the trade. And he did teach me, and I created this spot. So the end of it is that all 47 children found homes, good homes, quickly. Yeah. And the orphanage called my boss, Mr. Thompson, and said, we've got so many great resumes, we want your permission to disseminate all this information throughout New England. So for me, I'm thinking, really? A 30-second or 60-second television spot can change the lives of 47 children overnight? This is for me. I'm on in. This is power of the best kind. And that's when I decided I really wanted to be in TV.
Such a great story. As it relates to you as an interviewer, because I think everyone in the industry would say that you're a through and through journalist, how did you develop those skills? Because you conducted interviews that many would argue changed the course of history within Boston. What was your approach, and I guess how did you develop that skill?
I really don't know how I developed the skill. I think it really comes from my natural curiosity. I'm just curious about everything. I drive most people crazy who are near me, starting with my daughter. Why do I always have to ask? But I realize I drove my mother crazy because she used to say, you have to ask why about everything. So I think it's just me. I'm curious. I'm fascinated by the why of everything. I think people are fascinating. That's why I called this book Every Life a Story. I actually had a verb in there, every life is a story, and somebody talked me out of the verb for some reason. I'm not sure if that was smart or not. Was that you?
Unless it goes well.
It doesn't matter, but that's just who I am. It's how I'm built. I think we're all in this thing called life together. That's what I loved most about my job. I loved that we were seen as, the conveyors of information and community, I think, at Channel 5 back then. But it was a different time. It was a time when television was just getting started, when news was trying to figure out what is news, what are we supposed to be, where we were following things such as what we learned from the ascertainment of the people, where our mission, and this is not just about me, I'm talking about everyone I worked with. Our mission, we sought, was we were the information arm. You were the electrician or the plumber, or you ran the grocery store or the bookstore or the Athenaeum, and you didn't have time to go and sort of figure out what's going on in the world and how it relates to you. That's our job. And we took it very seriously. There's a responsibility that goes with it. This is, when none of us saw ourselves as celebrities or stars or TV people. We were reporters. You didn't use the word journalists because we thought of that as, those are Cronkites and, the big people who write for the New York Times. We're just reporters. So also, I think that in terms of interviewing people, you would learn something from every interview. So I never went into an interview thinking I knew everything. I knew why we were interviewing you, because you just wrote a book, or you just passed a bill, or you're the governor and you just vetoed something, or you're a member of the union and you just took a vote about something. Why did you vote for that? So you would learn something, and that could make news. And what I learned, at first I didn't really like the job of being an anchor, because it interfered with the day's reporting. But I came to like it, and the job came to grow as time went on, too. For example, I might have someone on, excuse me, I remember Tip O'Neill coming on, and live during a 6 o'clock news. Sorry, I'm just getting over all my grandkids' colds. And I asked him, how are you going to lead the House on this vote? I don't remember what the issue was, but it was the issue of the day. And he told us. So then I started to like anchoring, because I thought, oh, we can still be a reporter while you're doing all this other business. So, I grew with the job grew, and I'm very lucky, I think, to have had the job I had.
And you mentioned celebrity because your stature grew pretty significantly. I mean, you and Chet became this power couple in the industry, And I'm curious to know, how was it compartmentalizing your professional and personal lives, because they were so intertwined?
Yeah, well, maybe we in the end didn't do it so well. But while it worked, it was wonderful. We were married for 25 years, and we both loved our jobs. We both respected each other, and obviously personally, because we loved each other, but professionally too. And we clicked. The first time the station put us together was the 76th visit from the Queen to, I love this, so here we are celebrating America's 200th anniversary in our separation from England, our independence from England. The Queen comes to celebrate with us. I love it. I mean, you gotta love the irony. And it was a heck of a thing. This guy Thistle, who's the best news director in the world, ordered 11 live cameras, microwave again, no satellites back then. And we covered her and did an American history lesson from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. And it was the first time Chet and I worked together, and it just worked. We had just been married, and I'm studying like crazy. I never studied so hard my American history as I did for that broadcast, because you're not going to have time to go thumbing through your notes when you're on the air live. You got to put it up here. And I'm looking at Chet, he's doing nothing. I'm like, aren't you going to study? No, it'll be fine. Well, it turned out that this is what I mean about clicking, because he was great at just kind of giving you the play-by-play, if you will, and I was the caller. And it worked, and they put us together to anchor the evening news, and that worked very well too. Chet, smart guy, a good reporter, a good writer, and we really shared the joy of the job together. So there was no separation from work and home, because what did we talk about? News, you know. Did you hear what that guy said? Did you read that article? So we were really very much on the same page there. We used to say we couldn't possibly be married to anybody else because you would drive anybody else crazy. Each of us would drive someone else crazy. So there was that, and for me as a female to be an anchor, the first one, so that's news kind of, right? Then I'm with my co-anchor, who is my husband. That's unheard of. Then a couple of bad things happened. One, I got really sick, and God wasn't ready for me yet, so I'm still here. But my mother got very sick at the same time, and different things. And she had breast cancer and passed away. And then about a year later, I finally, after 5 years, I got pregnant and had a baby, and people were so kind and welcoming and warm. I mean, people wrote me letters and said things like, if your mother were alive, she'd tell you these things about being a mother and having a baby. And people made all these blankets and baby hats, and so many of them that I shared them with all the hospitals in New England. And it was a watershed time for me, because I felt so embraced by people I'd never even met, that whatever fears I had or concerns I had about being in the public eye were all erased, because I stopped seeing people en masse and I started seeing everyone as an individual. So through the tragedies and the illness and losing my mom is still so hard, 40-some years ago, it was a gift. Sorry.
No, and you know, I think you've articulated in a way what your magic is, and I have not seen another broadcaster able to recreate that. And it's an intimacy with your audience that, to this day, I imagine, when you see people on the street, they approach you. You might not know who they are, but they know who you are. And that is such a rare thing. So you've given us years of your life, and you know, again, I imagine that familiarity is a comfort to you.
It still is, yeah, absolutely. It's so nice. You know, people come up and say hello, and we stop and chat. And I did one funny thing. This
a very handsome young man. He looked like he was maybe 22 years old, not too long ago, some months ago, stopped and said, "Oh, you're Natalie Jacobson. I'm so happy to meet you." And I said, "Well, thank you." And we chatted for a little bit, and I'm going, "What?" So I said, "I have to ask you, how old are you?" And he said, whatever, he said, 23. And I said, "How do you know me?" And he said, "Well," he said, "at dinner time, my parents always put on Channel 5 News, and I was 2 or 3 years old, so you were part of my family." And he said, "You don't forget your family." Can you think of anything nicer someone could say to you? I hugged him. My son.
When it came to reporting on your own life and writing this book, what were the challenges? Because it's hard. I know from my own experience writing a memoir, you feel conflicted with how much of yourself you're going to put out there, what stories might be more important to you than you think a reader would be interested in. How did you navigate that?
Well, it's kind of odd, actually. And you know about this, and I'll tell you why Rob knows this. So it was March of 2020, and my children had just come for a visit to Florida. I was renting an apartment in Florida for 3 months, and COVID came. And suddenly everything shut down, including the golf courses, the restaurants, everything. So here I'm in this rented place with not knowing very many people and thinking, what am I going to do with myself? Should I go home to Boston? I just paid all this money for this place. So I thought, you know what? Maybe this is God again talking to me. Maybe my guardian angels are fluttering around, and I should write this book that people keep saying you should write. But what was this book supposed to be about? I had no idea. So I pulled out my computer, I went to Staples and bought a printer, and I just sat down every day for the next 6 or 8 weeks for about 5 hours a day and just wrote whatever came into my head. And then I started thinking, what are you doing? I mean, is this... And then I was calling you on Sunday. How did I know? Oh, from N Magazine, from Nantucket. I called Rob and said, so I think I'm writing a book. And every Sunday we had 1 hour together, right? This is before you were married and had a baby, actually, right? Or were you married?
I had the one baby.
Oh, you did it that time?
And I was married,
in 20, yeah, of course you did.
Oh,
you did it that order.
I got to make sure that's correct.
How odd. So I booked 1 hour with Rob Cocuzzo every Sunday and went over and sent him my chapters that I had written all week, usually 4 or 5 chapters. And the thing that kept me going is he would say, this is interesting. That's what I needed to know. Is this interesting? Would anybody give a hoot and want to read this? And you kept saying yes, and you'd back it up. So I could tell you were sincere by the comments that you made. I'd like to even hear more about this or whatever. So that kept me going to write the book. And then I came back home to Nantucket and put it away for a few months, and then I pulled it out again and thought, is this a book? And Nat Philbrick, whom you all know, a great Nantucket author, a historian, had advised me, he said, don't write a book, write stories. And then it turned out that's what I ended up doing, is just writing a bunch of stories. I strung them all together, and they seemed sorted to go together. And then, you know, you hire a copy editor type person or whatever you call it. I hired an editor, not a copy editor. I don't know anything about the literary world, sorry. I read a lot of books, but I don't know how you get from here to that shelf. Just at any rate. So I hired someone then to go over it, a terrific woman. She was very helpful. And then came the task of how do you get it on a shelf? And what I found out was that the publishing world had changed from when I was a younger person reporting in Boston, and you couldn't go directly to a publisher even and say, hi, what do you think? Do you want to publish my book, you had to go through an agent. That's the new, you can certainly expand on this, but that's all I know. All I know is I spent 6 months trying to find an agent, and nobody wanted to take me, because no one buys, as Bob Barnett said, a famed agent, said, nobody buys a local woman's memoir. And I said, well, how do you know that? Which ones did you represent, or what? And my argument didn't work. He was very pleasant, but hung up, yes. So, of course he did. I mean, you know, he did Hillary Clinton's book and, you know, famous people. So who's Natalie? So at any rate, so I ended up publishing myself, which means that you go and get a publisher who gets you printed, but you pay for everything, and then you hire a publicist, and you hire this person, you hire this. I only have to sell about 200 million books to break even, so if you'd be kind enough to buy one. At any rate.
I'm going to eventually open it to questions, so be thinking about that. But before I do, you can answer one of these 2 questions. The first one, it would be, through this process of reflecting on your life, did you discover anything new about yourself or a new understanding of your past that you wouldn't have uncovered had you not gone through this process? Or have you been in touch with people that have read the book that have been surprised to learn something about you that they hadn't? I mean, I certainly, when I was reading the book, whether it was your experience as a pilot, your near-death experiences, I was blown away by all the stuff that was happening off screen. Did anyone contact you with similar surprise?
Yeah, a lot of, well, no, but I did devote one chapter in the book to my biography, you know, where I was born, where I grew up. I have to admit the year. I was thinking, could you fudge that? No, you can't do that. But the rest of the book is not about me. So it's really, it's about you. It's about everybody that I came in contact with. Obviously, I didn't do every story I ever came in contact with in 40 years. But what did you ask me?
Whether other folks had found surprised to learn something about you.
Sorry.
Or did you learn about something about yourself and your experience?
I guess I learned that I ramble. No, I don't think I was.
Was it therapeutic? Was there something about going through it at this time in your life to be able to reflect on all that you've done?
You know, maybe it's this. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. But now that you ask me, and I'm struggling to answer, I think what I miss the most about not working is being with people. Being with all of you, because my job put me in touch with people like yourselves every day. Whether it was a story, whether it was the Muscular Dystrophy Association, where I came to love these wonderful children, I miss the camaraderie. I also miss the camaraderie with my fellow reporters and photographers, and the writers, etc. So I think writing the book, I felt I was continuing my conversation with you. So in that sense, I guess it was somewhat therapeutic. And I'd love to find something, I know I'm old, but I'm not really done yet. And I'm wondering what my next big thing is. I know it has to do something with, again, being with people and being part of the process of life and community and helping each other. I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm a reporter. And that's I think it's a valuable part of our lives. So I'm not sure, and I'm so pathetic at technology. I try, but I'm really bad. And my stepdaughter's here. I'm not sure I know where she's seated right now, but she was talking to me this morning about webcasts, and I'm going, okay, I mean, how do you do that? How do you find them? How do you even know which one you want to listen to? So I don't know what my next step is. If there's somebody out there who has an idea for me, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, now let's hear from you all. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask Natalie? Yes, ma'am.
I was struck by your use of the word reporter and how you keep talking about reporting, and I agree that that is what's most important. And I feel as if we've gotten away in the news of being reporters, and the people that are the broadcasters are more manipulators of the news. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that and how we can get back to old-fashioned
Well, I share your opinion and your angst. Maybe a little, just a quick thing, a little history. When broadcast was your news source, meaning ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS primarily at that time, before cable, in other words, the federal government demanded some things, such as that you be fair, and you had to prove it every 3 years when you renewed your license. That's what that ascertainment of community needs was part of. You had to prove that you gave equal time to candidates. Cable came along in the early 80s and challenged the federal government and said, you have no right to dictate any rules or regulations to us because we do not use federal airwaves. They won their case in court. As a result, they moved away from reporting, if you will, being the reporters, to what you see today, the personalities who espouse their own opinions. Our opinions were our opinions. I'm proud that we kept our opinions out of our reporting. And quite frankly, it was easy. It just came naturally. But there is a different mission today, and you might say, well, why is that? Well, you know, everything kind of always comes down to money. Cable figured out how to make money. Unlike broad, think of broad, as many people as you could get, bring them into the tent, watch our shows, buy the products that advertise us, that allow us to exist. Cable figured out something different, subscribers. So they could exist. They didn't need 150 million people to watch, you know, I Love Lucy or whatever, or their news show to make money, to attract advertisers, because they made enough money with subscribers, as well as then came advertising. So they could, you could have a cable show that only attracted 20,000 people and make a profit. So that allowed, then just the whole game of being out there, and more cable stations and more personalities came in to the picture. You know, I think of Chris Matthews, who has a home here, versus O'Reilly. So one was very left and one was very right. But they gave you their opinions. And that really started a big ball rolling of the more people you could attract. Now we're going back to how many people you can attract. And that advertising then starts to come into a play. So the bigger the personality, you know, the more successful the cable station. And how do you become bigger? By being more and more opinionated. So that's kind of where we are right now. And I think it needs to change. I agree with you. I wish I had a magic wand or could tell you I have this formula that'll make everything right, but I don't.
One more.
Time for one more. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would just thank you because I feel a sense of comfort when I see you for a time that you were in our homes and you were very trusted and for information, without opinion, without a mini dress on. So you've always been so kind. But I saw you once and I went, oh, Natalie, like I knew you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much part of our lives. So just thank you.
That's a very nice thing you just said. Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you. And can, yes.
I just want to say one thing. I would put you in the same sentence with Hillary Clinton any day.
I want to remind everybody that books will be for sale, hopefully outside, but downstairs, and then Natalie will be signing books. So we're going to have to stop and let you do that now so that you can all come back and hear Steve Shepard and John Stanton.
Thank you.